Hi everyone, I'm Charlie McMillan and I'm the Chief Executive of the Scottish Commission for People with Learning Disabilities. Without a doubt, the pandemic has had a profound impact on all of our lives. In fact, back in March last year, the common belief was that coronavirus would be the great equaliser, that everyone was at risk regardless of wealth, fame, age or anything else. A quote from a family carer in a survey SCLD undertook near the start of the first lockdown captures this really well. They said, "In a strange way, the limitations and social isolation that we always experience feel normalised as society at large cope with a bit of the same feeling." But as the weeks and months went on, it became clear that coronavirus wasn't to be the great equaliser. In fact, quite the opposite. For the people with learning disabilities we work with, it became apparent that coronavirus would serve instead to exacerbate already existing inequalities. For example, the withdrawal of support services may have been the only immediate solution to protect people, but what began as a novel situation soon led to social isolation and loneliness, as people were left cut off from their usual support networks.
I do suffer from depression because of one of my health conditions. I get it quite bad, and I've not been able to access those services. I kind of felt a bit left behind, and I could see myself 2020 getting worse and worse, but I do try to do other things, but it's a bit hard.
When the pandemic started, it was an absolute nightmare for two key reasons. One, I couldn't read the information that I was getting from the Scottish Government, and two, I didn't understand what the pandemic was. So I had to struggle through myself until I phoned my doctor. My doctor said to me, "Paul, I'll put you on the shielding list." And then I started to get some help with people delivering food and people phoning me up and asking me if I was okay. And then the Glasgow Disability Alliance phoned me and asked me did I want a tablet so they could communicate with their friends and all the other people who were involved in the pandemic, like the SCLD. My mental health was going up and down due to receiving a lot of what I would classify as junk mail and gobbledygook from the Scottish Government. I think the Scottish Government need to look at the information that they send out. They need to simplify all the information that comes out of Parliament. It's a nightmare. It's just 1 minute you're allowed to do something and then 2 days later you're not allowed to do it. And then 2 days later you're allowed to do it again. I just didn't know what was going on.
Some people, 18 months on, are still waiting for the return of their support. Constantly changing rules as well, while necessary, made it difficult for people to know what they were allowed to do, causing lots of distress and upset. And despite all the measures put in place, once people were able to study the data, it was found that people with learning disabilities were twice as likely as the general population to catch coronavirus and 3 times as likely to die from it. Even though we had these stark figures, it was a real challenge to ensure that people with learning disabilities were included as a priority in the vaccine rollout. And now, as society is opening back up and we're told that we will need to learn to live with COVID, there's a feeling that those who are more at risk are being forgotten again. As we begin to move forward from the pandemic, it is quite natural to want to forget about this dark and difficult 18 months. But it's important that we don't. A fair and inclusive recovery will require us to learn hard lessons from the pandemic. It will require us all to listen to the voices of people with learning disabilities to understand their experience of the crisis, what matters to them and what they feel went wrong. And, of course, things that went right.
And the SCLD was like my first organisation. It kind of reached out to me, and you set up the stay in touch page and whatever, and the community just sort of kind of grew from there, really. And then I became part of different groups within the SCLD, and then the SCLD reached out to other organisations. So it's been really, really, positive.
I liked doing face-to-face things, but we had to get used to doing everything virtual and do different parties on Zoom, and so basically I had to get taught how to use Zoom and different platforms. Yeah, and I've met new people through the pandemic, through the stay in touch page and things, which is good to meet new people.
We believe this project will play an important part in that. The coronavirus and people with learning disabilities study has investigated people's lives throughout the pandemic. Importantly, it's been shaped by people with learning disabilities themselves, including our very own COV Explorers.
Quite often, people with learning disabilities are left behind. We're the last to know, hear and have an opinion about anything.
I would like other people's voices getting heard, like Lindsay said, get their point of views across.
So I think getting this opportunity through the SCLD and through the Glasgow University as well, for people with learning disabilities, to make sure that everyone's got an equal life, basically.
What do you hope comes from the project? So we've got the findings now, so what would you hope that happens with the findings?
It's going to help organisations become better, because the information that they've managed to get from the researchers and from interviewing people with learning disabilities, it'll make organisations grow better, because they'll have a better understanding.
And one thing I'd hope that comes out of this is that we aren't pushed to the end of the pile of the papers again, that we're actually put on the top and made a priority.
We must make sure people with learning disabilities' voices continue to be front and centre as we move forward from the pandemic. And critically, we must seize this opportunity to create the fairer, more inclusive Scotland we all want to see.